Imagine walking through like a pristine Monaco-style luxury high-rise. You're nodding confidently at the doorman, feeling like you totally own the world.
Right, a complete power fantasy.
Exactly. But then you turn a corner, and suddenly you're watching a hyper-muscular man's skin violently sag off his body, just deflating like a punctured tire.
Oh, it's such a visceral image.
It really is. You run away in panic, only to stumble into a kitchen where you find your own mother cheerfully, methodically vacuum packing your deceased sibling into a folding suitcase. And you can actually hear the sound of bones snapping echoing off the tile.
It's incredibly intense.
Yeah, and today we aren't reviewing a psychological thriller or, breaking down a Christopher Nolan movie. We
Yeah.
are looking inside the real, struggling, magnificent mind of an actual human being.
It really is a profound privilege to look at this kind of material. What we have in our sources today is this rare, meticulous, scene-by-scene clinical document.
And it's incredibly detailed.
It is. We're exploring a multi-layered dream recorded by a patient and then analyzed side by side with a rigorous clinical and Jungian psychological interpretation. I mean, it's a masterclass in how the unconscious mind communicates when we're just pushed to our absolute limits.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this because our mission today is to explore this incredibly dense architecture of the human subconscious.
There's a lot to cover.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to explore how the brain processes severe, unspeakable trauma, the crushing weight of family karma, and radical self-transformation, all through the medium of what psychologists call a big dream.
Right, the big dream.
And I want to set the stakes right here for you listening. The details of this dream are bizarre, they're shocking, and they are highly specific to this anonymous individual. But the psychological mechanisms driving them?
They're entirely universal.
Exactly. How we fake our confidence, how we intellectually barricade ourselves against pain, and how our minds eventually force us to heal. That is universal. You are going to recognize the mechanics of your own mind in this dream today.
Yeah, and to really understand what we're dealing with, we have to establish what a big dream actually is in clinical terms.
Because it's not just a regular nightmare, right?
No, not at all. Most of the time, the dreams you just wave away over your morning coffee are what we call compensatory or processing dreams.
Like when I dream about forgetting my pants at the grocery store.
Right, exactly. They're your brain sorting through the mundane debris of your day, an email you forgot to send, or an awkward interaction. Sigmund Freud largely viewed dreams as a way to fulfill repressed personal wishes.
I was actually hoping we'd get into the Freud versus Jung dynamic here, because when you read this document, it feels entirely different from the whole, dreams are just repressed desires framework.
Yeah, the distinction is vital. Carl Jung took a radically different approach, and that is the lens we really need for this deep dive. Jung believed that beneath our personal unconscious, which is the repository of our own unique memories, lies what he called the collective unconscious.
The collective unconscious.
Right. This is an inherited layer of the psyche containing universal symbols or archetypes shared by all humanity.
Like a biological blueprint for the mind.
Exactly like that. Just as birds possess an innate blueprint for building a nest, we have a blueprint for the mind. A big dream taps into this much deeper layer. It doesn't occur just because you ate something spicy before bed.
So when does it happen?
It occurs at a major defining crossroads in a person's life, signaling what Jung called the individuation process.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just random neurons firing in the dark. It's almost like the psyche is staging a full-blown intervention.
That is the absolute perfect way to frame it. The dreamer's current way of living, their established psychological defenses, they've just reached a point of catastrophic failure.
Like they just can't keep going the way they have been.
Precisely. The conscious ego is losing the battle against reality. So the deepest parts of the unconscious mind step in. They pull up all the repressed grief, the unresolved trauma, and construct this vivid, terrifying, inescapable narrative to force the conscious mind to finally deal with a backlog of pain.
It's an evolutionary survival mechanism.
Yes, it's designed to push the person into their next stage of psychological development.
And the opening of this survival mechanism is just so cinematic in its deception. Let's look at the very first layer of this intervention. The dream actually begins in a state of trickery, like a dream within a dream.
It's a fascinating structure.
Yeah, so the dreamer finds themselves standing inside a super luxury residential complex. The clinical text compares it to Nishizabu in Tokyo or like the streets of Monaco.
Just absolute peak artificial sophistication.
Exactly, this massive, exclusive, pristine urban environment. The streets inside the complex are lined with heavily modified, ultra-luxury red and yellow sports cars. There are doormen everywhere, gracefully welcoming elite passengers.
And structurally, starting with a dream within a dream is our very first major diagnostic clue.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, in sleep science, this is known as a false awakening. When a patient reports false awakenings, we immediately start looking at their neurological load.
Her neurological load, like they're just burnt out.
Yeah, this phenomenon occurs when extreme mental fatigue collides with hyperbrain activation.
So the brain is essentially overheating, like a computer with, I don't know, 90 tabs open, desperately trying to keep the system from crashing.
That's a great analogy. The neurology behind it is wild. Normally, during REM sleep, your brain paralyzes your body, a process called rematonia, so you don't actually act out your dreams.
Right, so you don't punch the wall in your sleep.
Exactly. But when someone is under profound psychological distress, the boundary between the dreaming state and waking consciousness begins to blur.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the prefrontal cortex, the logical part of your brain, starts to boot up, realizing it needs to be alert to a threat. But the body is still exhausted and paralyzed.
So it's stuck between waking and sleeping.
Right. And to resolve this terrifying contradiction, the brain rapidly synthesizes a hallucination. It dreams that it has woken up. It creates a buffer layer, a simulated reality, because the actual reality is currently just too painful or exhausting to confront.
That makes the choice of the simulation so interesting. I mean, if your brain is building a safe room, why this super luxury Monaco-style residence?
It's a very specific choice by the subconscious.
And the kicker in the text is that the dreamer is not a resident. They are an intruder. They're sneaking in out of curiosity, pretending they belong, casually waving to the receptionist and the doorman just to keep up the ruse.
That right there, this luxury residence, is a monumental symbol of what Jung called the persona.
The persona, that's like the social mask, right?
Exactly. It comes from the Latin word for the masks worn by stage actors. It is how we want the world to perceive us. In this specific case, the luxury complex represents flawless, untouchable, elite social success. Wealth, status, perfect control.
But the fact that they're an intruder,
Right, that exposes a profound psychological state known as dissociation.
so they feel like a total fraud in their own aspirational life.
Yes, a painful, exhausting inconsistency exists between the flawless image they feel pressured to project to society and their actual internal sense of self-worth. They are an imposter in the very mask they have constructed to protect themselves.
And you can really feel the anxiety of that imposter syndrome mounting as they wander deeper into this complex. I mean, the architecture itself starts to turn against them.
It becomes incredibly oppressive.
Totally. They're walking down these beautiful, long, freely accessible hallways, but at the end of every single hallway, there's a shutter. And the shutter is steadily closing.
Such a powerful image.
They can see through the gaps, and on the other side is a resident-only supermarket. But no matter what they do, they can't get in.
We have to look at what a supermarket fundamentally represents to the human mind. It is a place of nourishment. It is where you acquire the essential sustenance required to keep a body alive.
Right, it's basic survival.
And the visual of the closing shutters is just devastating. It tells us that this person is surrounded by superficial luxury, the modified sports cars, the polite doorman, but they are completely systematically cut off from the basic emotional nourishment they desperately need to survive.
Man, that's heavy.
The persona they built is literally starving them to death.
It's the classic tragedy of being surrounded by water but dying of thirst. And as they are standing there getting blocked from this nourishment, they look at a directory map on the wall trying to figure out where to go.
Well, the map is fascinating.
Right, because the map doesn't show hallways or exits or floor numbers. It shows a heliocentric planetary map, like an ancient, incredibly detailed drawing of planets orbiting the sun.
Yeah.
And I was staring at this detail in the text, and it hit me. Planets orbit a center. They go in circles. Is the dreamer stuck circling the same trauma without ever moving forward?
That is a brilliant interpretation, and it aligns perfectly with the cognitive dysfunction this map represents. A map is our internal framework for navigating reality, right?
Yeah.
Our problem-solving tools, our deeply held beliefs about how the world works.
Right. It tells us how to get from A to B.
But a heliocentric map is an archaic, outdated model for navigating a modern luxury high-rise. The unconscious is explicitly showing the dreamer. The tools you are using to navigate your life are hopelessly obsolete.
You're using a solar system to find the stairs.
Exactly. You are trying to find an emotional exit using a map that only shows you how to go in endless gravitational circles around the exact same old problems.
They literally do not have the map for the territory they're standing in. And while they're trying to decode this useless solar system, the environment shifts from just passive-aggressive to overtly hostile.
The societal pressure kicks in.
Yeah, this massive horde of people comes marching down the hallway. The text is very specific. It's a horde of young Chinese female students.
Which is such a specific demographic detail.
And they aren't hostile in a violent way. They aren't shouting or attacking. They just possess this atmosphere of absolute entitlement, like they fully belong there, moving with immense momentum towards some school inside the complex.
And how do they treat the dreamer?
They completely, utterly ignore the dreamer. They are walking with such relentless force that the dreamer has to constantly dodge, weave, and press themselves against the wall just to avoid being trampled.
This is a masterful projection of societal pressure. If we look at the dreamer's waking life, these students represent an overwhelming external energy that is entirely out of the dreamer's control.
It feels exactly like being an NPC, a non-playable character in your own mind's video game.
I love that analogy.
You have no agency. The main characters of the world are just pushing past you, and you're just background scenery.
The NPC analogy captures the exact clinical state of the dreamer's ego here. The ego feels completely invisible, inconsequential, and incredibly fragile in the face of collective societal demands.
Totally irrelevant.
Yet the momentum of the world threatens to run them over. They are spending all their energy just dodging the demands of others, trying not to get crushed by a society that doesn't even acknowledge their existence.
And as a final insult in this, luxury prison, they find the elevators. There's a standard elevator that only goes up to the 4th floor. But next to it, there's a gleaming, ultra-high-speed elevator that shoots up to the unimaginably high VIP floors.
But of course, there's a catch.
Always a catch. It's only for special people. And the dreamer just innately knows they aren't special enough to use it.
A textbook representation of an internalized ceiling. The dreamer has internalized a deep-seated belief that spiritual, emotional, or social elevation is reserved for others.
They're locking themselves out.
Exactly. They are self-selecting to remain trapped on the lower levels of their own psyche.
So if you step back and look at this first layer, pretending to be an elite resident, starving outside a supermarket, decoding a useless planetary map, dodging a society that treats you like a ghost, and staring at an elevator you can't ride.
It's exhausting just to list it.
Maintaining that level of pretense and anxiety is biologically exhausting. And that exhaustion is what finally breaks the simulation. The system crashes.
The false awakening shatters.
Right. The dreamer wakes up from this first layer, plunging us into the next phase of the architecture. And this is where the false awakening shatters, dropping them into an environment that is supposed to be safe, but is actually infinitely more dangerous.
The transition here is violent in its abruptness. The unconscious mind strips away the Monaco-style luxury, the artificial persona, and throws the dreamer into the most intimate, vulnerable space imaginable.
Yeah. The dreamer wakes up, but they are still deep inside the big dream. The scene instantly cuts to them lying down in their parents' bedroom.
A place of supposed ultimate safety.
Exactly. A childhood bedroom is theoretically the baseline of safety. But immediately, something is deeply corrupted. The dreamer notes that normally their brother should be sleeping next to them.
But he's not.
Instead, occupying that intimate space in the parents' bed are 2 bad seniors from their past. Guys who used to actively, viciously bully the dreamer.
This is a catastrophic breach of psychological security.
Yeah.
In Jungian analysis, these bullies are the manifestation of what we call the shadow.
Okay, I want to make sure we really ground that term, because the shadow sounds very mystical, but it's a very real, everyday phenomenon, isn't it?
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
The shadow is not a ghost or a spirit. It is the psychological container for all of our repressed trauma, our hidden fears, our shame, and our capacity for darkness.
So everyone has one.
Everyone has a shadow. If you've ever found yourself consumed by sudden, inexplicable road rage, screaming at a stranger over a minor traffic slight, that is your shadow momentarily taking the wheel.
Oh, wow. I've definitely been there.
Right. It's the suppressed aggression and stress breaking through your polite persona. In the case of this dreamer, their shadow contains the deep-seated, unresolved trauma of being dominated, humiliated, and victimized by these older boys.
And what makes this scene so chilling to me is the lack of physical violence. The bullies aren't hitting the dreamer. The dreamer is just lying there in the dark, completely paralyzed, listening to them.
It's pure psychological terror.
The bullies haven't even noticed the dreamer is awake. They are casually whispering to each other, planning what they literally call countermeasures. They're muttering things like, when that person comes, we have to respond like this, or we need to set this trap.
The whispering about countermeasures is a critical diagnostic detail here. It translates directly to the dreamer's waking life.
House.
It tells us that this person is suffering from compulsive hypervigilance. Their unconscious mind is obsessed with planning for attacks, constantly running defensive algorithms. They are perpetually on guard, even in their sleep.
So they can never turn it off.
Never. And the tragedy of the location cannot be overstated. The parents' room represents the ultimate regression to childhood safety. The fact that the shadow has invaded this space means the trauma has metastasized. There is no safe harbor left in the dreamer's mind.
The defenses have been breached at the foundation.
Exactly.
And the tension is unbearable. The dreamer actually sits up and tries to greet these bullies, trying to diffuse the terror. At first, the bullies smile and act nice.
A classic abuser tactic.
Yeah. But then, with that terrifying whiplash of abuse, the tension spikes. Out of nowhere, one of the bullies grabs the dreamer violently by the collar. The dreamer, terrified, asks, "What is going on here?"
And what do they say?
The bully just points toward the window and says, "You should go outside and see."
Notice the shift in agency there.
Yeah.
The shadow, the container of trauma, is literally directing the conscious ego to step out of its compromised safe space and confront the reality of its own psychological yard.
The trauma is forcing the confrontation.
The trauma is taking control of the narrative.
And the yard is where the dream's logic starts to fracture even further. The dreamer walks outside into the daylight and finds two people they know from real life standing there.
More avatars.
Right. One is a friend who is incredibly wealthy and materially successful. The other is a close friend who, tragically, developed a severe, debilitating mental illness during middle school.
Such a stark contrast.
Extremely. The dreamer looks at these two radically different people and decides, we should all have a barbecue together.
This scene is a beautiful, albeit desperate, representation of a split ego. These two friends are not literal people functioning in the dream's logic. They are internal avatars representing two warring factions of the dreamer's own mind.
Like two halves of themselves.
Yes. You have two extreme, contradictory self-images fighting for dominance. The wealthy friend represents the dreamer's desperate desire for material success, stability, and societal validation.
And the other friend?
The mentally ill friend represents the dreamer's deepest, most repressed terror, the loss of sanity, total vulnerability, and complete mental collapse.
And suggesting a barbecue, I mean, it's like the ego is playing peacekeeper, trying to force these two radically different, terrifyingly opposed parts of themselves to just sit down over some hot dogs and get along.
It's a frantic attempt at psychological integration. The dreamer is unconsciously trying to reconcile their desperate ambition with their paralyzing fear of breakdown. They want these parts of themselves to coexist peacefully.
But I'm guessing that doesn't work.
No, because the psyche knows that a simple barbecue cannot fix a structural collapse. So before the charcoal is even lit, a new, overwhelming element invades the yard.
This is the visual that I honestly cannot get out of my head. As they are standing there, two men walk up. The text describes them as looking like they are from Colombia, and they are unimaginably muscular.
Just massive figures.
Absolute titans of muscle, veins bulging, intimidating beyond belief. They march right up to the dreamer and the two friends, intensely flexing, posturing, showing off their dominant physiques.
When the ego feels threatened by the bullies inside the house, by the irreconcilable split of the friends outside, it calls in the heavy psychic reinforcements. These muscle men represent aggressive, hypermasculine defense mechanisms.
But then comes the glitch. One of the men is a genuine, solid bodybuilder. But the other man, when he flexes, he looks huge, powerful, invincible. But the moment he stops flexing, the moment he just relaxes his arms, something horrifying happens.
It's a grotesque transformation.
The clinical text says his skin violently sags and droops. It hangs off his bones as if he has suddenly become morbidly obese, or like a balloon that has been entirely deflated.
It's such a shocking visual.
When I read this, my mind immediately went to modern internet culture. It is exactly like when an influencer is using a heavily manipulated, face-tuned video filter, and for a split second, the software glitches.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Right. The digital mask slips, and you suddenly see the exhausted, dark-circled, incredibly human reality beneath it.
What's fascinating here is that your social media filter analogy is a brilliant modern translation of a very ancient psychological concept. What we are witnessing with this sagging muscle man is the dynamic of ego inflation.
Ego inflation, so blowing yourself up to look bigger.
Exactly. In Jungian terms, when a person feels intensely vulnerable or small, their ego can inflate to protect itself. It pumps itself up with false bravado, aggressive posturing, macho energy, the literal flexing of muscles.
Just to scare off predators, basically.
Yes, it is a rigid, intimidating defense mechanism designed to scare the world into backing off.
But maintaining that inflation, keeping that filter perfectly aligned, keeping those muscles constantly flexed, must require a staggering amount of biological and emotional energy.
It is entirely unsustainable. And that is what the sagging skin visually represents. It is a visceral, terrifying metaphor for how incredibly fragile that false bravado actually is.
It's just a balloon.
Maintaining a persona of invulnerability burns immense caloric and cognitive energy. The sagging skin exposes the extreme physical and mental fatigue the dreamer is hiding behind their tough exterior.
So the second they stop trying,
The split second they let their guard down, the moment they stop actively, consciously flexing their defenses, they completely collapse into this deflated, exhausted, pathetic state. It shows a defense mechanism that is right on the brink of total systemic failure.
even the internal avatars recognize it. The wealthy friend actually looks at the deflating muscle man and says, "That's way too big."
Right. Even the ambition side knows it's too much.
It's like even the internal voice of success realizes that this defense mechanism is an absurd, unsustainable overcompensation. The two muscle men do this elaborate, aggressive handshake and turn to leave, and the deflating man is just sagging, his skin hanging off him as he walks away. It is a haunting image of failed armor.
And this forces a critical mechanical question for the psyche. If the external defenses, the pristine luxury persona in the first dream and the intimidating flexing muscles in the second are all failing, sagging, and collapsing, where does all the toxic anxiety go?
It's got to go somewhere, right?
Exactly. How does the mind process the emotional fallout of that failure?
The psychological waste has to be purged, which organically leads us into the next phase of the dream, because suddenly the dreamer realizes they desperately, urgently need to use the restroom. The pressure is critical. But as we're about to see, the dreamer's mental plumbing is suffering from a catastrophic backup.
The urgent transition to the bathroom is no accident. In the clinical analysis of dreams, a toilet is almost never just a toilet.
What is it then?
It is a profound archetype. It represents the psychological apparatus for purifying the self. It is the designated space where we go to flush away toxic emotions, daily stress, and repressed trauma. It is the fundamental mechanism of emotional release and psychological sanitation.
Well, if this is a sanitation system, this dreamer has built an absolute nightmare of a machine.
It's incredibly convoluted.
They walk into the bathroom, but it's not their normal toilet. It's positioned weirdly low to the ground and shifted awkwardly to the left. But the design of the bowl itself is what's absurd.
Tell us about the drawers.
Yeah, when they open the lid, they aren't met with a simple bowl of water. Instead, built into the front right of the toilet, there is a small hidden drawer. You literally have to pull out this drawer to reveal a specific dedicated urinal just for standing.
So unnecessary.
And then on the left side of the unit, there is an elaborate built-in storage compartment specifically designed for toilet paper and sanitary products. It is this ridiculously complex, multi-layered, over-engineered contraption.
And this absurd complexity is the key to unlocking the dreamer's core pathology. The clinical term for what we are seeing here is intellectualization.
Intellectualization.
Intellectualization is a highly advanced, often incredibly detrimental defense mechanism. It occurs when a person deals with profound emotional turmoil, not by allowing themselves to feel it, but by retreating into their intellect to think about it.
Oh, I see.
They categorize the pain, they analyze it, they build complex philosophical or rational frameworks around it.
So instead of just breaking down and crying because their heart is broken, they sit there and build a psychological spreadsheet detailing the sociological and biological reasons why they might be sad.
Precisely. They shift the blood flow from the emotional center of the brain, the amygdala, up into the prefrontal cortex. It is a way to create a safe distance from raw, terrifying emotion.
They're thinking their feelings instead of feeling them.
Exactly. They have built such complicated, highly vigilant, over-engineered intellectual defense mechanisms, perfectly symbolized by this drawer-laden, multi-compartment toilet. That natural, simple, emotional release is entirely blocked.
The plumbing is too complicated to actually function.
Yes. The dreamer is standing there, desperate to release this mounting internal pressure, but they literally cannot figure out which drawer to open or which compartment to use. The intellectual machine they built to protect themselves is now the very thing preventing them from finding relief.
They're trapped in a prison of their own coping mechanisms, and the panic sets in. In their desperation to figure out this toilet, they run out of the bathroom and go find their father.
They're looking for help.
Right, they ask their father for help, and the father comes back with them, sporting this very gentle, kind, reassuring expression. But the dreamer explicitly notes a bizarre detail. This man is not their real father.
He's someone else entirely.
It is a completely different person. He looks like a man in his mid-60s with stark white hair and glasses.
This detail raised a massive flag in the clinical analysis of the document. When a parental figure appears in a dream, looking entirely different from their real-life counterpart, we have officially crossed a boundary.
Where did
We are no longer dealing with the personal unconscious. We have entered the realm of the collective unconscious. This white-haired man is not the biological father. He represents a profound archetype known as the Great Father or the Wise Old Man.
The wise old man. So we're talking about like a Gandalf or Dumbledore figure, but living inside your own neurology.
In a mythological sense, yes, exactly. He is a symbol of inner authority, objective wisdom, and ultimate unconditional affirmation.
But why did they need him?
The clinical background reveals that the dreamer's real-world relationship with their biological father was incredibly strained, distant, and emotionally void. So because the biological father failed to provide safety, the dreamer's psyche dips into the collective unconscious and generates this archetypal figure to provide the authoritative support they so desperately needed but never received in reality.
And the dreamer really, really needs support in this bathroom. But what this wise old man does next is genuinely shocking.
It's totally unexpected.
They walk back into the bathroom. The dreamer is still desperate, still trying to decode the drawers on this toilet. And suddenly, without a single word of warning, this gentle, white-haired father figure clenches his fists, raises his arms, and violently, repeatedly punches the toilet.
Just absolute destruction.
He brings his fist down with unbelievable force, smashing the entire complex contraption into 100 shattered pieces.
It is a stunning, breathtaking moment of violence in the dream's narrative.
I have to push back on the interpretation of this, though. Let's look at this logically. Breaking a toilet in a dream, that sounds like a terrible apocalyptic omen.
It certainly does on the surface.
Right. It literally sounds like a plumbing disaster of the soul. You just said the toilet is the purification system. If you smash the system, aren't you just left with toxic waste flooding the house? Isn't that a catastrophic psychological breakdown?
That is the most logical assumption. And honestly, if you consult many traditional, superficial dream dictionaries, breaking a toilet is indeed listed as a warning of prolonged illness or trouble. But this is where the specific clinical context is everything.
So it's not a bad thing.
In the context of this particular dreamer's intense, paralyzing intellectualization, this destruction is not a disaster. It is a massive, incredibly necessary breakthrough.
How does destroying the ability to purge help the patient?
Because the toilet was no longer a place of purging. Think about what it had become. It was a barricade. The complex drawers and analytical compartments were entirely preventing the dreamer from letting go.
Oh, I see. It was stopping the process.
Exactly. The intellectual defenses were failing, and the pressure was building to a fatal, psychosis-inducing degree. So the inner wise old man, that deepest, most ancient source of psychic survival instinct, recognized that the machine was broken beyond repair.
He couldn't just fix it.
He had to violently tear those defenses down. This is the absolute definition of clinical catharsis. Sometimes, when an emotional blockage is so calcified and heavily defended, gentle therapy just won't work. You have to blow up the pipes to let the water flow.
Wow. He is destroying the overthinking so the feeling can finally organically happen.
And it does happen.
It does, almost instantaneously. After he smashes the toilet to pieces, the dreamer is shocked and asks him, "What's wrong? Why did you do that?"
And this wise old man figure turns to the dreamer and starts weeping.
Such a powerful release.
He has tears streaming down his face behind his glasses, and he just says, with this deep, guttural, overwhelming emotion, I am so frustrated. I am so regretful.
This is the emotional zenith of this sequence. We must remember that every character in this dream is a projection of the dreamer's own psyche.
So it's not the father crying. No, those tears of immense frustration and regret flowing down the father's face. Those are actually the dreamer's tears. It is the dreamer's own deeply repressed grief, their profound frustration with their life, and the unbearable weight of their family karma finally being allowed to flow.
The destruction was necessary.
The violent destruction of the intellectual toilet was the exact mechanism required to force the emotional floodgates to open.
It is heartbreaking, but also incredibly deeply relieving. But it begs a massive central question. What is this deep repressed grief? What is the specific unbearable tragedy that this dreamer has been over-intellectualizing and hiding from behind sagging muscles and complex drawers for so long?
The dream isn't going to let them hide from it anymore.
No, it's not. To find out, the dream takes us out of the wreckage of the bathroom and into the kitchen, and the scene waiting in the kitchen is honestly one of the most horrific, yet psychologically vital sequences in the entire clinical document.
It is a sequence that perfectly, ruthlessly illustrates how family trauma is inherited, how grief is avoided, and how the failure to process reality basically poisons a bloodline.
The dreamer walks into the kitchen. Their mother and sister are there. The sister, interestingly, doesn't quite look like herself, which we'll get to.
Right. Another avatar.
But the mother is engaged in an activity that defies all logic, sanity, and morality. The dreamer's younger brother is also in the room, but the crucial context here is that the brother, in real life, is deceased.
That is vital to remember.
In the dream, the mother is holding a large syringe. She is happily, cheerfully humming to herself as she injects the dead brother's body with some kind of chemical preservative so he won't rot.
The emotional dissonance in this imagery is deafening. The juxtaposition of a cheerful mother and a corpse.
It's chilling. The mother is casually chatting about taking the deceased brother on a trip. Maybe taking him to the hospital, maybe taking him on a vacation. The destination is ambiguous.
But she's preparing him for travel.
Yeah, she decides the most efficient way to transport him is to pack him up. She brings out this massive, heavy-duty folding suitcase. The text says it's the size of a futon. She lifts the brother's body, places him inside the suitcase, and then proceeds to attach a vacuum to it.
A literal vacuum.
She vacuum packs him exactly like you would compress bulky winter clothes for storage. As the air is violently sucked out of the plastic, the brother's body is brutally compressed and folded into thirds, and the dreamer stands there and distinctly, vividly hears the horrifying, visceral sound of their brother's bones snapping and breaking as his body is crushed into the luggage.
It is an incredibly traumatic, grotesque image. But to understand why the brain is generating this horror, we have to look closely at the mother's demeanor.
She is humming.
She is cheerful. She is treating the preservation and mutilation of a corpse as if she's just packing for a light weekend getaway. In clinical psychology, we identify this as a textbook example of a manic defense.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of a manic defense. How does a brain get to a point where it is smiling while vacuum packing a tragedy?
A manic defense is an extreme psychological reaction against the reality of profound loss or death. When a person experiences a trauma so severe that fully acknowledging it would lead to a catastrophic depressive crash, a total collapse of the self, the brain pumps out cortisol and adrenaline and forces the psyche in the exact opposite direction.
So it's like a forced high.
The mother's psyche is completely, aggressively rejecting the absolute agonizing finality of death. To accept that her son is gone forever would destroy her. So her mind deploys mania. She acts cheerful, she becomes hyper-busy, highly productive.
And dragging him in a suitcase.
She literally tries to drag the deceased along in a suitcase, which is a profound symbol of daily, casual, temporary transit, because she hasn't even begun to process the actual grief. She's physically trying to keep him in the realm of the living through sheer, frantic, delusional willpower.
But the dreamer is just standing there watching this delusion unfold, and the dreamer hears the bones snapping. It's so gruesome and visceral. But the analysis in the source text says something incredibly counterintuitive. It claims that hearing those bones snap is actually a highly positive, necessary sign for the dreamer's mental health.
It is entirely necessary.
I need you to explain that. How can listening to your dead brother's bones break be positive?
Because unlike the mother, the dreamer's psyche is actually doing the agonizing grief work. The mother is pretending everything is fine, floating above the pain in a manic bubble. The dreamer's subconscious, however, is finally forcing them to witness the brutal, unyielding, irreversible reality of death.
It's making them look at it.
The snapping bones represent the harsh, incredibly painful process of compressing and packing away the reality of this loss into the psyche.
So they are packing it away so they can carry it instead of pretending he's still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Unprocessed grief is impossibly heavy. It takes up too much space in the mind, paralyzing the individual. To survive, to continue living, you have to pack it down. You have to force it to fit into the suitcase of your ongoing life.
Wow.
The dream is explicitly showing the dreamer that moving forward and processing this death is going to be agonizing. It's going to sound and feel like breaking bones, but it is an absolute necessity. They are finally packing the grief away properly, acknowledging the finality of it rather than letting it rot their mind or pretending, like the mother, that it isn't there.
And the real-world context behind this tragic death makes the burden even heavier. The text provides the actual backstory of this family, and it is just a case study in dysfunction.
It's very sad.
When this younger brother was born with a severe disability, the real-world father simply couldn't cope with the reality of it in a traditional, grounded way. Instead, he pursued a highly esoteric spiritual path, constantly seeking enlightenment, meditating, and listening to what he called guiding voices from an unseen higher world.
He engaged in what we call a spiritual bypass. He retreated into spiritual transcendence as a coping mechanism, using the pursuit of higher consciousness to float away from the painful, muddy reality of raising a profoundly disabled child.
Right. But there was one critical, fateful moment. A situation arose involving the disabled brother's medical care or a required trip to the hospital. The father was supposed to consult his spiritual guiding voice for direction. But because he was so utterly humanly exhausted by the ongoing trauma, just that one time, he refused to listen.
He missed the signal.
He ignored his spiritual intuition, and whatever tragedy occurred as a result of that lapse led to a lifetime of agonizing, unrelenting regret for him. He was destroyed by it.
And how did the mother react to his devastation?
She wasn't supportive. She cruelly, ruthlessly mocked him. The text describes a specific memory. They were standing at the kitchen sink, and the mother pointed to the empty soap bubbles floating in the dishwater. She looked at her husband and compared his grand spiritual enlightenment and his guiding voices to those fragile, empty, useless soap bubbles. She just laughed at his broken faith.
That anecdote is devastating. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it exposes the systemic, intergenerational trauma at the heart of this dream. You have an insurmountable, tragic disconnect between the parents' coping mechanisms.
They were in two different worlds.
The father makes a desperate, dissociative reach for spiritual transcendence, the empty bubbles, trying to ascend above the pain of earthly life. The mother, in stark contrast, is grounded in a grim, manic, hyper-practical, ruthless coping with physical reality. She is vacuum-packing corpses with a smile while he is chasing bubbles and weeping over missed voices.
And the dreamer is caught right in the crossfire of this.
This is the essence of family karma. This is the heavy, suffocating baggage the dreamer has inherited. A father consumed by regret and spiritual escapism, and a mother consumed by manic denial and cruelty. The dreamer has grown up in an emotional wasteland where true, honest processing of pain was entirely absent. The communication framework of the family was completely broken.
Which raises an incredible burning question for me. With such an overwhelming, suffocating amount of trauma, being terrorized by bullies, suffering a tragic family death, being raised by entirely disconnected and dysfunctional parents, and feeling crushed by society, how has this dreamer survived this long?
It's a miracle they are functioning.
Right. How have they not completely lost their mind in real life? Well, the dream actually answers this. It reveals the dreamer's secret, highly sophisticated psychological weapon. And that takes us into the next phase of the dream. The survival kit with snakes, elephants, and scorpions.
This sequence is where the dream's level of self-awareness reaches a remarkable peak. The psyche actually pauses the narrative to explain its own operating system to the dreamer.
During this whole horrific kitchen sequence with the vacuum packing, the dreamer realizes that their sister has been standing there the whole time. But as we noted, she doesn't look like herself, and she is acting almost like a secretary.
She has a job to do.
Throughout the entire dream, this sister figure has been quietly, methodically taking notes on a clipboard, recording everything the dreamer says, thinks, and analyzes. And at this moment, the sister steps forward and presents the dreamer with an image, a visual memo of the dreamer's own coping mechanism.
Let's decode the sister's role first. In Jungian psychology, when a sibling appears but looks different and acts as an objective recorder or guide, they represent the archetype of the anima.
Let me push back on the choice of the sister for a second. If his family, the mother, the father, the dead brother, is the primary source of his trauma, wouldn't his subconscious pick a neutral party to take notes? Why use a family member in the objective guide?
That is a very perceptive question. The anima often takes the form of a female figure closely associated with a dreamer, but slightly altered, precisely because she needs to bridge the gap between the deeply personal family trauma, which is the unconscious, and the waking ego, the conscious.
Oh, so she's the bridge.
She is part of the family, so she understands the terrain, but she is acting as a detached secretary, showing she has risen above the emotional chaos. By taking meticulous notes, the anima is trying to anchor these crucial psychological revelations so that when the dreamer wakes up, the conscious ego won't just forget them or repress them again. She is the psychological archivist.
It's like the brain is desperately taking screenshots of the dreams so the data isn't lost upon waking. And the screenshot she shows the dreamer is fascinating. It's a direct quote from the dreamer themselves.
What does it say?
The dreamer looks at the clipboard and reads their own words. When I have a problem, I make an ABC list and draw a snake, an elephant, and a scorpion and store them. Cute, right?
Cute, right. That seemingly throwaway phrase is actually the absolute linchpin of this person's entire defense strategy.
I have to say, when I read that specific line, it hit me so hard because it is so relevant to how we operate today. I looked at that and thought, this is exactly like internet culture.
Oh, so?
It's like when people today make dark humor memes or funny TikToks about their own severe trauma. You take something deeply painful, clinical depression, debilitating anxiety, horrific family abuse, and you put a cute pop song filter on it. We cutify the terrifying things because if we look at them raw, in all their monstrous reality, they would destroy us. It makes the unmanageable manageable. It's therapy speak as a shield.
That is a magnificent translation of the concept. You've hit the nail entirely on the head. What the dreamer is describing with this alphabetical list of animals is an incredibly advanced psychological strategy that combines strict compartmentalization with that intellectualization we saw earlier with the toilet.
Let's break down the animals themselves, though. Why specifically a snake, an elephant, and a scorpion? I was looking at these, and none of them are cuddly. The snake feels like a classic universal symbol for hidden danger, but the elephant really threw me off. Is that about the sheer, unmovable weight of his family trauma?
You are exactly on the right track. In the language of archetypes and mythology, these are not random zoo animals. They represent primal, overwhelming forces that threaten to crush the human ego.
Okay, let's go through them.
First, the snake. The snake universally symbolizes the creeping fear of death, toxicity, and betrayal, but also regeneration. It is the danger lurking in the grass that you cannot see until it bites you.
And the elephant.
The elephant represents the massive, crushing, immovable weight of fate and reality. It's the inescapable, suffocating burden of the family karma and the disabled brother's death. It is the literal elephant in the room that the family refused to acknowledge.
Wow, yes, and the scorpion.
And third, the scorpion. The scorpion represents defensive, venomous aggression. It is the sudden, violent sting of trauma from the bullies, the hypervigilance, the sudden betrayal in relationships.
So you have the creeping anxiety of death, the crushing weight of fate, and the venomous sting of past trauma.
Exactly. These are terrifying, raw, unconscious energies. If the dreamer experienced these energies in their unfiltered form, their fragile, exhausted ego would be completely shattered. So what do?
They draw them.
They use their highly developed intellect. They turn these massive archetypal terrors into a categorized, alphabetized ABC list. They reduce monsters to cute little drawings. They file them away in mental folders.
It's a brilliant survival mechanism. Honestly, it kept them alive in a household that was emotionally dead.
It is brilliant, and it served a vital purpose for a long time. But, as we saw with the highly complex multi-drawered toilet, this defense mechanism has a fatal, unavoidable flaw. By intellectualizing and cutifying the trauma, you trap the emotion inside.
You're not fixing anything.
You never actually process the scorpion's venom. You just draw a cartoon of it. The dream is explicitly, urgently telling the dreamer, this survival kit worked for your childhood, but it is no longer enough to sustain you as an adult. The plumbing had to be smashed for a reason.
Because you can't just draw a picture of a broken heart and file it under H. You actually have to sit in the dark and feel the pain of it. So, if hiding behind false personas in luxury high rises doesn't work, and intellectualizing trauma into cute lists doesn't work, and building complex mental plumbing doesn't work, what actually does? What is the path forward for this person? Where does the real healing actually happen?
The dream is finally going to show them.
The dream gives us one final, striking, beautiful image to answer that question. And this leads us to the culmination of the dream, the rhythmic repair of the soul.
This final scene provides the ultimate psychological antidote to the entire terrifying nightmare that preceded it.
The dreamer leaves the kitchen and finds themselves back outside the house, in the yard. Remember the two friends from earlier, the wealthy one and the one with the severe mental illness.
The split ego avatars.
Yeah, they are still there in the yard, but their state has completely devolved. They have completely regressed. They are now stripped down to their underwear, wrestling and playing in the dirt and sand like toddlers, completely ignoring their surroundings. They are totally absorbed in their own superficial, meaningless game.
They represent a state of profound unconsciousness. The ego fragments, obsessed with wealth and terrified of madness, are trapped in instinctual, infantile drives, completely oblivious to the profound, life-saving work happening right next to them.
And that real work is happening just a few feet away. The dreamer looks past the wrestling friends and notices an old woman. The clinical text describes her as looking like a resident of an Indian slum. She is a world away from the pristine Monaco-style luxury of the first dream.
Completely different universe.
And she is working. She has these ingenious handmade machines tools. She has literally cobbled together from half-cut plastic bottles, rubber bands, and scrap materials. And with these crude tools, she is taking battered, worn-out, completely destroyed shoes, and she is meticulously repairing them.
The contrast in this imagery is the entire point of the dream's message.
It's mesmerizing to visualize. The dreamer stands there and watches her work, noting that she is incredibly skillful. She moves with this rhythmic, steady, unbothered grace. The dreamer is deeply, profoundly moved by this sight. They say out loud, "This is amazing." But the friends playing in the sand in their underwear couldn't care less. They don't even glance in her direction.
Let's unpack the heavy symbolism of this old woman, because she is the key to the dreamer's salvation. Unlike the artificial, hollow, fake luxury of the Nishizabu residence at the very start of the dream, where everything was shiny, expensive, but essentially dead and starving, this woman represents gritty, primal, unvarnished reality.
She's grounded.
In Jungian psychology, she is the manifestation of the Great Mother archetype in her most positive, grounding, nurturing aspect. She's the earth itself.
The Great Mother. So we had the violent Great Father smashing the toilet to force the emotion out, and now we have the Great Mother quietly fixing the shoes. But why shoes? Out of everything she could be fixing, why footwear?
Shoes are deeply, universally symbolic. They are our foundation. They are the only thing separating our bare flesh from the harsh, unforgiving reality of the earth. They protect us as we walk on our life's journey.
That makes so much sense.
The fact that the shoes she is working on are battered and worn out represents the immense damage the dreamer's soul has taken over the years. Their foundation is broken. They can barely walk through life anymore.
And she is repairing them with plastic bottles. Not magic, not high-tech machinery, not luxury materials, just scrap.
Exactly. It sends a profound message. True healing doesn't require luxury or perfect conditions or a flawlessly curated persona. It requires ingenuity, humility, and resilience. But the most important word used to describe this scene is rhythmic.
Rhythmic.
The rhythmic, steady nature of her work signifies a natural, unforced, and deeply ingrained capacity for self-healing. Her work isn't frantic and manic like the mother vacuum packing the suitcase. It isn't violently explosive like the father smashing the toilet. It is steady. It is the slow, reliable heartbeat of psychological repair.
It's the daily work. I love how you contrasted this with the friends. The friends ignore her because they represent the part of the dreamer's consciousness that is still trapped in superficial values. The part that worries about money or gets intimidated by the muscle man or yearns for the high-speed VIP elevator.
They're still distracted.
That part of the brain entirely underestimates the power of quiet, muddy, foundational healing. The ego always thinks healing has to be grand, dramatic, or expensive. But the soul knows it's really just about sitting in the dirt and sewing the sole of your shoe back together, stitch by painful stitch.
This quiet scene is the true climax of the dreamer's individuation process. The unconscious mind is delivering an explicit, undeniable mandate to the conscious ego. It is saying, stop looking upward. Stop looking at the ultra-high-speed elevators that you believe you aren't special enough to ride. Stop trying to sneak into the luxury residence of an artificial, exhausting persona.
And start looking downward. Look at your own feet.
Yes. Look at the mud. Look at the broken shoes. True psychological repair isn't glamorous. It's the rhythmic, everyday maintenance of the soul. It's accepting your reality, no matter how impoverished, damaged, or traumatic it might feel, and doing the slow, rhythmic work of putting the pieces back together, using whatever scrap materials you have.
That is just, it's incredibly powerful. Which brings us to the synthesis of our journey today. This wasn't just a weird nightmare about sagging muscle men and broken toilets. What we just walked through was a monumental, life-altering internal rite of passage.
It was a wildly successful psychological intervention executed by the dreamer's own mind.
The dreamer's mind successfully orchestrated a total necessary breakdown of their highly intellectual artificial defenses. It violently smashed the complex toilet of their overthinking. It ruthlessly exposed the fragile, sagging reality of their macho defenses. It laid bare the cute ABC list that was keeping them from actually feeling the venom of their trauma.
Everything had to go.
All of this terrifying destruction happened to allow for one singular thing: true emotional release. The father's tears, the acceptance of the agonizing, bone-snapping grief of the brother in the suitcase.
And by clearing away all that debris, it ultimately pointed the dreamer toward a new, sustainable way of living, away from the fake luxury, and toward the grounded, primal, rhythmic healing of the old woman fixing shoes.
I want to connect this back to you, the listener. Because while this dream was wildly specific to one person's trauma, the incredible machinery behind it is operating inside your head right now. Your brain is doing this exact kind of heavy lifting every single night.
It never stops working.
Those weird, nonsensical, emotionally exhausting dreams that you wave off in the morning while you're pouring your coffee, the ones you laugh about with your friends, that might actually be your own psyche fighting a desperate war to heal you. It's your brain trying to smash the defenses that are holding you back.
Our minds are desperately trying to communicate with us, trying to save us from ourselves, if we're only willing to stop and decode the language.
So I want to leave you with a specific thought to ponder today as you go about your life. Think about your own coping mechanisms. When the heavy, inescapable realities of life start closing in on you, what terrifying snakes and scorpions are you turning into cute little drawings so you can avoid feeling their sting? Are you hiding behind therapy speak and internet humor, filing away your pain instead of feeling it? And if you are, is it finally time you let the plumbing break so you can let it all out?